Justice Breyer never learned his history. Otherwise, he may have written or read Thomas Jefferson, who on June 12, 1823 said, "On every question of construction, carry yourselves back to the time when the Constitution was adopted. And instead of trying what meaning may be squeezed from the text, conform to the possible one in which it was written." Pretty good advice from a founding father that is so dearly loved by the left. Well, what about the Ten Commandments case in Alabama? Anybody been following that? Let me ask you a question. What law did Chief Justice Moore violate? You know, they always say, oh, he violated the separation of church and state. But you know, that clause starts out by saying, Congress shall make no law. Is Judge Moore Congress? Who's closer to Congress, Judge Moore or the Alabama federal district judge? Which judge of these two violated the 10th Amendment? You know that one that's no longer taught in schools. The powers not delegated to the U.S. are reserved to the states or the people. Justice Moore stood in front of the judge and said, I will remove those 10 commandments now if you tell me what law I have violated. You won't hear that in the major mainstream media. The judge couldn't tell him one because the First Amendment guarantees there will be no law. How can you violate something that says there will be no law? Nobody knows this stuff, folks, because the media is part of the problem, isn't it? It's the reason, by the way, our founding fathers invented the committees of correspondence to get around the British-controlled press and get the truth out to the colonists. You see, this connection here in the internet is our committees of correspondence. And we're starting to scare them a little bit. Thank God. Thank God for freedom. By the way, here's some 10 commandments. Anybody recognize this building? It's the U.S. Supreme Court, the East Portico, over, by the way, the title Justice, the Guardian of Liberty. Cornerstone document, the 10 Commandments, that Blackstone told us was the basis of natural law. We used to teach this in our schools, by the way. This is a really liberal state book. This is a Massachusetts textbook on government. It's a series of questions. Is there a higher law than the Constitution? The Constitution is the highest human law, but the law of God is the highest of all laws. To whom are the representatives responsible? To the people and to God. Do laws which restrain a man from doing wrong infringe on his liberty? This is my favorite. They do not, because he has no right to do wrong. Profoundly simple if we taught that there is such a thing as right and wrong. We have replaced that now, folks. You know what with? Read your curriculum. Tolerance and intolerance. That's the new morality. And your children are being indoctrinated to tolerate all ideas as equal. That is the true meaning of the term. Look it up in your dictionary. That definition has gone through a metamorphosis. It no longer means putting up with something which is not acceptable, which is what it usually meant. It now means you must respect and honor the beliefs and behaviors of all. Look it up. It's changed in every dictionary I've looked it up in. If one were free to do right and secure against wrong, what would we have? Perfect liberty. It's what we had for 200 some years. The longest known successful form of government in the history of the world is the United States under its current Constitution. Now we begin to redefine it, but it's still hanging on tight by its fingertips as long as we don't let it slip away from us. Without the Declaration Principles, the Bill of Rights means whatever. The best way to look at the true meaning of this amendment, Second Amendment, is to look at what the courts have said about it. Oh, really? Generally, the Constitution is considered to be a living document. No, it isn't. It's a bedrock document. Not anymore. Not under the current interpretation. It's shifting sands, and we're building our house on the sands, aren't we? Constitution is considered to be a living document, which means that the interpretation changes to meet the needs of the times. The judges and courts of each generation provide the interpretation of the document. In this case, the courts, the Second Amendment only provides the right of a state to keep an armed National Guard. A blatant, historic lie. Without the Declaration of Principles, the Bill of Rights limit the people rather than Congress. May citizens enjoy rights that are not listed in the Bill of Rights? Keep in mind, they no longer teach the 9th and 10th Amendment. Teacher's answer? No. No. The Bill of Rights is now being interpreted to our children as a document that limits the people. Without the Declaration, government no longer secures our rights, it defines and grants them. Remember now, the national standard said governments often define property rights. Here's a good one for Mary Alice. The new way they're teaching it, zoning is a system of land control that gives governments the power to define and use land in certain areas. We heard how that shifted. Michael Kaufman did a beautiful job of explaining the shift that has taken place. It's been our curriculum this way for 15 years, at least. I've traced it back 15 years. Economic rights allow you to participate freely, which includes the rights to own property, but always subordinate to the government's right to exercise its right to take property for public purposes. This is a direct quote right out of the curriculum your kids are learning from. This is the way it's taught now. If government defines property rights, there is no such thing as private property. There is only police power. And the police power allows the government to restrict the use of property through zoning laws or force an owner to give up his or her land. Folks, it's coming. This is what the future citizens, government leaders are believing today. Governments sometimes use the power of eminent domain to protect the environment, taking land for environmental reasons. Generally falls under controlling pollution or preserving natural areas. I look out before me and I see a fairly nice looking natural area. 5 minutes. This is telling us that government has the right to take it based on that criteria alone. This is the next step in the progression of what we're fighting today. We may win the battle today, but you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can teach new dogs new tricks. That's what's happening. We're going to lose our nation even if we win today, if we don't get back education. Well, reorienting education, according to UNESCO, prepares students to transform society for the future. A curriculum reoriented towards sustainability would place the notion of citizenship among its primary objectives. Citizenship training with the right attitudes. That's the reason No Child Left Behind names the Center for Civic Education as the only NGO allowed to write our standards for civics training. This is the federal curriculum, and all of its themes are embedded in every subject. The subjects are now just carriers for the federal themes. They also named the We the People program, also written by as America's model textbook. This is the reason most of your schools are using this now, because it's free. You've already paid for it through your tax dollars. They also, by the way, are in charge of not just the standards and the curriculum, but they have the contract to write the NAEP test. So one NGO, nobody got a chance to bid for this contract, has the contract for the standards, the curriculum, and the assessment. And they will tell you, oh, by the way, CCE was a NGO started by this man, Chuck Quigley, out of Berkeley, California. He's still in charge of it. This was founded in 1968, a radical leftist group that wants to take control, along with the UN. On their website, you can go and find out what teaching democracy globally, internationally, and comparatively for the 21st century mission of schools really is. They state, in the past century, the civic mission of schools was education for democracy in a sovereign state. Old news, folks. In this century, by contrast, education will everywhere become more global and international, And we ought to improve our curricular frameworks and standards for a world transformed by globally accepted and internationally transcendent principles. Those things which, according to these radicals,